in American society as far as the war is concerned. And to many people in the United States, it is a war which has been which is Israel's war. But coming to the second point of the threat, well, there may not. I don't think there was an immediate threat to the United States, but there was certainly a direct threat to Israel. And the problem is that threat to Israel was existential. It is not for the first time that I'm hearing it, but more than a decade ago, in my various conversations with various people, it was very clear that Iran had threatened to to eliminate Israel from the face of the earth. These statements have been made by no less than the Ayatollah himself. So, and these statements have continuously been made over the last 4 decades. Now, the question is, if the leader of a particular country makes those threats, then the country against whom those threats are being made, I presume, will take it seriously, especially when that country has the ballistic missiles to reach them and also has got adequate uranium.
Hmm.
Now, I agree that the uranium has not been found. Now, that is going to be a challenge, and that uranium can be used anywhere.
Hmm.
So this war is not going to go anywhere. I don't think it is going to go the Iran way,
Hmm.
because if you put troops into the if you put ground troops into that area,
Hmm.
I'm afraid it's going to be a very long drawn out war and a very expensive war. It'll be
Okay.
worse than
Let me get
Afghanistan.
in Sierra Claire on that. Sierra Claire is joining us. She's a foreign policy analyst. Also with us is John Rosamondo, who's a geopolitical and national security strategist. Coming to you first, Sierra Claire. You know, the
The
very
very
words
words
that
that
have
have
been
been
used
used
by
by
this
this
individual,
individual,
Mr.
Mr.
Kent,
Kent,
who's
who's
put
put
in
in
his
his
papers,
papers,
he
he
says,
says
Iran
Iran
posed
posed
no
no
imminent
imminent
threat.
threat.
We
We
started
started
this
this
war
war
due
due
to
to
pressure.
pressure.
Going
Going
by
by
what
what
the
the
previous
previous
speaker
speaker
said,
said,
is
is
it
it
Israel's
Israel's
war
war
that
that
the
the
US
US
is
is
really
really
fighting?
fighting?
Well, you were talking earlier about, is it possible for Joe Kent to be the only person in the administration who didn't understand the Iran threat? And there is some issues with the Trump administration personnel, and we've seen previous officials were either let go or they resigned because they had disagreements with the administration and with Trump. And unfortunately, these are personnel issues. That's the same kind of thing we saw in Trump's first term, and many of us were hoping that Trump would be able to kind of root this out in his second term, because there are people who are very they are Republican maybe, or they claim to support Trump, but they really don't, and they're planted in there for that reason. Now, in terms of, is this Israel's war or America's war, it's
But ma'am,
both.
isn't that Trump's problem? Isn't that Trump's problem himself? Because he can select his officials. If his officials are going to leave, then that's not just a problem of the situation itself, but perhaps something that Mr. Trump should have addressed.
Absolutely. It is something that I think Trump needs to address, and there are people within his inner circle that want to help him address these people. It's very hard, though. It's very difficult. These people, some of them, they claim to be very loyal to Trump, and they have ulterior motives. So to give
Okay,
Trump
I
credit,
believe that
it's
the reaction
difficult.
of President Trump is ready. Let's quickly play out that reaction to Joe Kent's resignation.
President, your Director of National Counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you
Well,
talk
I
to
read
him?
his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
All right, let me get in a quick response from Joe Rosamondo on that. President Trump believes that Mr. Kent was weak on national security. Now, that may be his view in hindsight. He was a National Counterterrorism Center chief for over a fortnight that this war has gone through. But judging by what Joe Kent is saying, what's the evidence that there was a threat from Iran to the United States?
Well, let's put it this way. Joe Kent's post had him focusing on domestic terrorism. And we know, one of the major things that's come out since the start of this war is the threat of Iranian orchestrated domestic terrorism. I mean, I can't see how he can't see that. I know that he's done a lot better than some of his predecessors when it came to addressing domestic terrorism. But I think the problem here is you have a mismatched ideology. I mean, he goes in and says that Israel pushed the United States into the Iraq War, which is a complete and utter lie. We went into Iraq because of information that was furnished by Iranian-linked individuals. So I think that Mr. Kent is.
But there were no
making a
weapons of mass destruction there either.
Well, let's put it this way: we received false intelligence from the Iraqi National Congress, which was linked with Iran.
So how do you know that's
So-
not happening all over again?
Well, let's put it this way: you have the IAEA that validated a statement that Iran was not in compliance with its obligations under the non-proliferation
I
treaty.
thought Hans Blix said there was no to the
we-
best of my memory, Hans Blix said that there was no proof of any nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction.
Plus, you have documents that were leaked that show that Iran was developing an implosion device. What do you use an implosion device for? Developing nuclear weapons. And then, Iran has repeatedly hidden the ball going back to the 2000s. I mean, don't forget that you had Stuxnet in 2010 that set Iran back a decade with its nuclear research. So I think a lot of these arguments about nuclear weapons, are just hysterical.
Okay,
But the-
Robin Biro, let's assume that this information is correct. Let's assume that the intelligence is correct. There's also a possibility they may not have a full-fledged nuclear weapon. There's always a possibility that they could launch a dirty bomb, but that perhaps is where the threat emanates from. Perhaps a little more for Israel than anybody else, but there is a threat, and that's the argument coming in from the other side.
Yes, that is the argument coming from the other side. Interestingly enough, Marjorie Taylor Greene made a very good point this past week. She said that for all we know, they could have already allied with Mexico and be harboring some device there in Mexico that could launch missiles right here into the United States. I mean, there's always going to be concerns. We're worried right now about cells within the United States. I have friends with intel right now that are briefed on this, that there's a dramatic threat. I just want to make clear that we really do not know where this uranium is. This conflict will not end ever until we do find out where it is. And we should have had the intelligence on this well beforehand. We should have also known well beforehand the risks with the Strait of Hormuz, and to rely after the fact on the goodwill of our allies without really making arrangements with them beforehand is reckless and irresponsible. This needs to have a finite end so that it doesn't become a war in perpetuity like Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right. I think that's an important point. And Sierra, would like to respond to that, because the point is this. We don't know when this war is going to end. We don't know what the cost is going to be, how many hundreds of billions of dollars are going to eventually end up being spent, and also the havoc that it's going to cause to global economies. Now, for Trump, it may be fun to shoot, Iranian Navy ships. A lot more fun to sink them, he says, than just capture them. But that's not how the rest of the world is looking at it at this point of time.
Well, President Trump is taking this very seriously. We all know his style and his rhetoric, but he's taking this very seriously. And that's why he said on Air Force One, I think it was on Sunday night, he said, they asked him, why are you doing this? And he said, because it's the right thing to do. And so that's, what's ultimately motivating this here. And there is a cost. There's oil markets volatility and things like that, but it's a short-term cost. And I think for President Trump and for most Americans, we want to do the right thing and pay the short-term cost. And that's for the world as well. It's going to be good for everybody. And you mentioned the spending the money. The U.S. military has a budget now of $1 trillion, and that money was already allocated by Congress. So there is a narrative coming from some people who want to say that this war is in America. The discourse is that, this war is costing the taxpayers a lot of money. The money was allocated already by Congress. However it gets spent is up to, various different people within the military. But the money was already allocated and already basically earmarked to be spent on military issues. So it's not really costing anything additional to the American taxpayer at this point in time.
Well, maybe not to the American taxpayer, but taxpayers globally are certainly looking at this war with a lot of concern, because they certainly don't want oil to cross a certain threshold where it starts hitting their pockets. But let me bring in Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Mordechai Kedar. you know, the United States would have wanted a much shorter conflict. They certainly, I don't think, were expecting or planning for a long conflict like this, Lieutenant Colonel Kedar. And the point is, has Israel led them to such a situation? Because it seems from President Trump's statements that he wants an off-ramp, but is just not getting one.
Look, not only this, you can add that nobody expected the Iranians will broaden the war to include the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Cyprus. Nobody expected this. These people